Parkhurst Products Incorporated, The Trading Card, History, Part 3. Welcome back, everyone. And before we begin, I'd like to point out one thing I haven't covered in this series. The Jefferson Burdick, ACC, American Card Catalog, letter and number designations assigned to each set. This omission has not been deliberate. It is something I rarely ever use, due to the fact my research relies mostly on dates and company names. However, at the conclusion of this 4- or possibly 5-part series, once the broader narrative has been fully established, I will include a reference page listing all associated sets, along with their respective ACC designations. Okay, let's get started. In the last video, Part 2, we wrapped up with the 1955-56 Parkey's hockey set. A bit of preemptive context. Topps had stepped away from hockey card production, not just for 1955-56, but for the following season as well. Parkhurst also took the hockey card production season off in 1956-57. We believe this pause was likely due to further licensing negotiations. In Part 3, we dive straight back into the thick of it. Kennedy thought he was in a head-to-head battle for hockey, but with Topps being absent, he had time to relax. But the reality was much bigger. Topps had already quietly crept across the border with baseball, had football in its sights, and had already moved into supplying non-sports. A less obvious threat Kennedy hadn't fully grasped. The battlefield was far larger than Parkhurst ever imagined, so buckle up. We're about to see how Topps flanked Parkhurst on every front. The reality for hockey sales was clear. George Kennedy was already earning nearly as much from just 2 Canadian teams as he had managing all 6, and with far less effort, having shed the burden of 4 American teams. But with Topps on a 2-year hockey hiatus and poised to return, you might think Kennedy could take a breather. Not a chance. Parkhurst was under siege. Other sports, combined with a steady wave of non-sport issues, began crowding the aisles, encroaching on what had once been Parkhurst's uncontested territory. Kennedy now faced a nickel-for-nickel battle, with Topps pressing constantly, determined to leave Parkhurst without 2 nickels to rub together. This brings us to the relationship between Topps and O-Pee-Chee. I don't want to turn this into an anthology of their business dealings, but understanding their strategy is critical to explaining how they were able to rival, and eventually pressure, Parkhurst into giving ground. Much like if Topps was a boxer, constantly working the opponent's body throughout a fight, their approach was long, methodical, and measured, not aiming for a knockout, but steadily chipping away at Parkhurst's territory, distribution, and market share, something Kennedy was not quite prepared for. So, what happened in 1954 that we didn't cover in the last video? We held off because it fits perfectly into Part 3. In Part 2, we touched on the relationship formed in 1954 between Topps and the O-Pee-Chee Company, brokered by their savvy sales manager, Frank Leahy, who would later go on to own O-Pee-Chee in 1961. This agreement allowed O-Pee-Chee to produce and distribute Topps card releases in Canada. That year marked the beginning of Canadian baseball production, evidenced by wrappers and counter display boxes. The cards themselves, however, remained unchanged. Only the packaging differed, at least initially. While all the artwork originated with Topps, the printing plates would then be sent up to Canada and modified as needed. This is clearly seen on the 1954 baseball wrappers, which changes from the American 6 cards per pack to the Canadian 4, and box counts shifting from Topps' standard 24 count to O-Pee-Chee's 36 count. These weren't cosmetic decisions, they were economic ones. Then Topps made the ultimate move. Around this time, Topps began incorporating expanded manufacturing language on nearly all wrappers and many boxes. What had once read, Topps Chewing Gum Incorporated, manufactured Brooklyn, New York, printed in USA, was now joined by, in Canada, made and distributed by O-Pee-Chee Company Limited, London, Ontario, under license of Topps Chewing Gum, Brooklyn, New York. Effectively, what was protected in the US was now open season in Canada. All Topps had to do was ship the artwork north, and just like that, the Canadian market was unlocked. The barrier wasn't removed. It was literally sidestepped. And it didn't stop there. Almost every Topps sports and non-sports product release was funneled through O-Pee-Chee. Some products were modified and then manufactured in Canada when the trading card subject warranted it. Others weren't. Topps simply shipped the finished cards along with standard wrappers and boxes. O-Pee-Chee then would package only 4 cards per pack, whereas Topps generally offered 5 or 6. The O-Pee-Chee workers would manually stamp the counter display boxes with a 36-count ink stamp, crossing out the original 24-count. No artwork changes required. Bada bing. A system built for speed and scale. An entirely American product could now be packaged for Canada with minimal effort. Early products listed card counts on the wax pack wrappers, but around 1956, that practice disappeared altogether, reducing costly artwork changes. From that point forward, the presence of a 36-count stamped box became the default indicator of Canadian distribution, and that's where the bubble burst for Parkhurst. For the first time, Kennedy was no longer competing against a single product line, but an entire system. While it often appears that nearly every Topps product from 1954 onward carried the O-Pee-Chee licensing language, we're not 100% certain that all of them actually made it into Canada, even with the O-Pee-Chee edict printed on them. In most cases, Topps had printed the wording universally, not as confirmation, but as preparation, just in case a product crossed the border, as evidenced by the large number of 36-count stamped boxes still found in the hobby today. To carry the Parkhurst history forward, the images are allowed to speak for themselves, visually reinforcing the record and guiding historians toward proper stewardship of the hobby. And in this battle, it is the boxes and wrappers, not the cards, that serve as the true storytellers. Now that's a lot of product Parkhurst had to contend with. Approximately 22 Topps Canadian products were shown, although the total more respectfully extends past 30, and that's from just 1954 to 1960 alone. It does continue on past there, but these examples should suffice. So here we are. When baseball, football, and non-sports are taken together, Parkhurst faced near constant competition, elbow-to-elbow battles for shelf space and countertop real estate. This was not experimentation, it was full commitment. We now come back to wrestling for the second year for Parkhurst, and we see something of a repeat this year. With the backs stating the 1955-56 series, we can only surmise the release came just after the 1955-56 hockey issue, or in early 1956. This set expands significantly to 121 cards, up from just 75 the previous year. While many images parallel the earlier issue, the 1955-56 cards feature a horizontally oriented reverse with green-backed text, a short biography, and, importantly, each card highlights a different wrestling move, complete with an accompanying photo for illustration. And the names of each wrestler remain on the back of the cards. A new yellow box with green numbering replaces the earlier red box with yellow numbers, making the 2 years easily discernible at a quick glance. No wrapper or display box has been found for this year, even though 2 differently colored wrappers are known from the prior season. Those wrappers can only be placed in that earlier time period due to changes in name design and the removal of the card count from packs in 1956, details that help firmly date these sets. All of this will be reviewed in detail in Part 4 of the Parkhurst History series. Additionally, hockey would also return in 1957-58, adding insult to injury. That said, all was not lost. Kennedy countered, sometimes with similar issues of his own creation, other times head-to-head competition. We will try to make reference to those throughout each Parkhurst issue, assuming we ever get there. Survival now depended on mechanical upgrades, timing, and alliances. And with the next issue, a friend of Kennedy stepped in. Warren Bowman threw George Kennedy a lifeline, or at least bought him some breathing room. We now arrive at the intriguing 1956 Frontier Days issue, first released by Bowman Gum in 1953. The set celebrated cowboy culture and the mythology of the American West. Given George Kennedy's friendship with Warren Bowman, it's no surprise that Parkhurst followed with its own version a few years later, reinforcing what had effectively become a 2-versus-2 landscape. Kennedy and Bowman on one side, Topps and O-Pee-Chee on the other. Parkhurst issued 121 cards compared to Bowman's 128, with both sets sharing identical artwork, except for 7 cards that differ. Parkhurst simplified the design by using only a single rifle on each side of the border, while Bowman included the rifles along with additional native or cowboy-themed decorative elements. And let's not forget, Bowman was in his own heated battle with Topps at the time. so why wouldn't he lend Kennedy a hand? Releasing a parallel set after the fact certainly didn't hurt Bowman, and if it pulled even a nickel's worth of attention away from the Topps products that O-Pee-Chee was pushing, all the better. In Part 2, we mentioned that Parkhurst's last known serial premium was the 1955 Race Against Time set. However, another promotion from that same year was overlooked, partly because it was issued so close in timing that it's difficult to determine which actually came first. Based on the evidence, we're assuming the order as presented here. This overlooked promotion involves Frontier Days cards packaged individually in single card cellos through Nabisco. The front of the box features both a Frontier Days and an airplane card with the words Photo Magic, indicating that this release came out around the same time as the 1956 Photo Magic card set. Next to be reviewed, there is something quite fascinating about the Nabisco. Individually cello-sealed Frontier Days cards, they are slightly larger than the standard Parkhurst dimensions of 2.5 by 3 5/8 of an inch. Instead, they match the Bowman format at 2.5 by 3 3/4 of an inch. By size alone, this firmly establishes Frontier Days as a separate issue altogether. Take heed, PSA. Let's keep a steppin' and move right into one of the most interesting Parkhurst issue, 1956, Photo Magic. Parkhurst's entry into the wildly popular self-developing card craze of the 1950s. For reference, in 1955, Topps reissued a set originally released in 1948 called Hocus Focus, using the same self-developing premise, though it was never released in Canada. Maybe Kennedy was watching Topps more closely than we thought. This 60-card set was printed on photo stock with undeveloped fronts. They measure a mere 1 3/4 by 1 7/8 of an inch. A true multi-subject issue. It includes baseball players, dogs, planes, and wrestlers, and may represent the true missing link, as it also contains at least 4 hockey star cards. Packs are believed to have held 4 cards and a blotter, as they required water to activate the image, a step often improvised by children, which explains why so many surviving examples show incomplete development or water damage. What makes this set especially interesting is that while we've seen several wrappers, and even a couple of display boxes, the cards themselves are rarely encountered, quite the opposite of what we've discussed so far. As previously noted, Nabisco also offered Photo Magic cards as serial inserts. While no confirmed in-package examples have surfaced, it's assumed they followed the Frontier Days format, single cards sealed in individual cello wrappers. Next on the docket are the CFL Photo Magic cards, approximately the same in size to the earlier multi-subject issue. This tough 50-card set was printed on photo stock with undeveloped fronts, and packs included cardboard blotters for developing the player images. Brief player biographies appeared on the backs. Once again, wrappers and display boxes have surfaced, but the cards themselves remain difficult to acquire. The set contains 10 cards for each of the 5 teams listed on the display box: Calgary Stampeders, Edmonton Eskimos, Saskatchewan Roughriders, Winnipeg Blue Bombers, and Montreal Alouettes. Notably, these teams came from 2 different leagues, leaving out several others, suggesting additional teams may have been planned for a second series that never materialized. In progression, the next card set is the 1956 Operation Sea Dog, or should we call it Crash Dive? Strangely, that is the name that appears only on the wrapper, never on the cards themselves. And, to my knowledge, only a single wrapper example has surfaced. No display box is known, and the cards remain somewhat scarce. This vibrant 50-card set is largely water-based, featuring ships and boats with a loose Canadian wartime influence, though not exclusively so. The marine-themed issue incorporates many historically accurate World War II elements. The name may have come from a 1943 film titled Crash Dive, starring Tyrone Power, as it mirrors the set's theme in several notable ways. We now walk the dog into 1957 with a 42-card set titled Fido. Issued in standard card size, the set features photographs of various dog breeds. The backs provide a brief history of each breed, including its history, along with detailed information such as height, weight range, and breed group classification. The Fido set is frequently not documented properly, due to the advertising on the reverse. Each card carries the line, "For your pet, better get Dr. Ballard's Pet Foods." As a result, the set was long referred to simply as Dr. Ballard. The reasoning is understandable. Why else would that name appear so prominently? It may have been compensation for the use of the images, or reflective of Parkhurst's broader expansion at the time into other consumer products, something we will discuss in Part 4. Also, along the bottom of the card backs is an additional credit: Copyright Color Graphics Company, exclusive license in Canada. Color Graphics was a large American printing-based company and likely held the rights to the images. Their name appears periodically across numerous hobby issues, including one other with Parkhurst, the 1960 Canadian birds. The attractively designed Fido wrapper, which seemed to be one that is more easily found, definitely compensate for the lackluster plain white box the packs were once sold from. We believe the next issue, 1957 Adventures of Radisson, was driven in part by the hype generated from O-Pee-Chee's successful 1956 Davy Crockett release. The wrapper design is both simple and striking, black with just enough red to make it an absolute eye-popper. Few packs from the era are this visually bold. The design features nothing more than the word Radisson running through a beaver pelt trapper's hat, and it works beautifully. This 50-card set was tied to a television series that aired in Canada on CBC, a major network called the Canadian Broadcast Corporation, and proved popular enough to be syndicated in the United States under the name Tomahawk. The series depicted the adventures of 17th-century explorer Pierre Esprit Radisson and his brother-in-law and fellow explorer Médard de Groseilliers. Their travels took them throughout the Great Lakes region and into Hudson Bay, set against the backdrop of the North American fur trade. Well, friends, we've reached the end of Part 3 with at least one more installment, maybe two, still to come. Getting to the 1960s will take time, thanks to the sheer amount of detail in Parkhurst's history. We've spent considerable time on Topps and O-Pee-Chee, but it was necessary to set the stage. Part 4 will cover the remaining Parkhurst issues, leading up to Topps' dominance and Parkhurst's eventual decline. But that wasn't the end, far from it, and we look forward to showing you why. This video is sponsored by Needham, where we aim to bring you the stories behind the cardboard, the details, the context that shape the hobby. Whether you're a seasoned hockey or CFL collector, or just starting out, there's always more to discover, more to debate, and more to chase.